morning, everybody, and welcome to Handing the Shame Back. This is a show dedicated to survivors of child sexual abuse here in New Zealand and out across the world. So for some of us, it's morning. For others, like my next guest, it's evening. My name's Gloria Masters, and I'm here to help host this. Each week, I interview another survivor, and it's with a view really for people to share their stories in a safe place and feel heard. And honestly, the lessons and the learnings that come from this are so powerful. However, if you feel triggered at all, please feel free to check out the show notes below. Immediately go and find one that supports you, and we will be thinking of you. In the meantime, however, it's my absolute honour to welcome to the show Ed Squire. Ed Squire, of course, is a fellow survivor, and I'm going to give a little bit of an intro here, Ed.
Sure.
Ed is one of those indomitable spirits. Think butter, how far can you spread it and where can it go? That's Ed. He's amazing. He set up a charity in 2018 called MeTooWhatNow, and this is dedicated to survivors of adult survivors of child sexual abuse. He then went on to set up a visible kindness arena in 2020. And that's where I first met Ed, because I was lucky enough to be a guest on his show. He will tell us all about that. But wait, there's more. He's also now created Ed Squire Media, with his main tranche at the moment being Video Marketing Mastery, which was set up on December 12th, 2021. So talented, so clever, and so much to share. Welcome, Ed.
Well, thank you, Gloria. I really appreciate the wonderful, kind words, and I'm really, it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. So for our audience out there, we are looking at survivors, obviously, of child sexual abuse, and you are, of course, a one. And I guess I wondered what your journey has been, what you have found to be so, coming from a place of shock, truth, reality, and then moving forward. What's kind of been hallmarks of that journey for you, Ed?
I think it took decades for me to get to the point of where I was able to deal with it. And I know for men, it's a different path in the journey and recovery than it is for women, just because of the nature of who we are. So I think just ignoring the fact that there was really something wrong with me that was affecting my life and all the relationships around me. And when I began to realize that, I ended up losing my marriage. And the direct result of my dysfunctions and not dealing with these things. But, I think really the day that we all talk about the dark night of the soul. And I say that in the actual term that it really is. I mean, you can say that all day long. If someone says, "Oh, I'm broke," are you really broke? Like, if you have money if you have availability on your credit card to spend, you're not broke. Or if you have the opportunity to borrow money from someone, you're not broke. When you're broke, you can't get nothing from nowhere, from nobody. And when you're in the dark night of the soul, you are completely at the end of yourself. And there's no, it's a very, very desperate place to be. That would be, I think, the hallmark of my story and my life changing, was just really actually arriving at that place and realizing I am in a really bad place and I don't know what to do.
When you describe, and that's a really that's a really interesting way that you've described it. When you actually put those words around it, you know, and I hear the word the end of yourself, it makes me think, and then there's possibility for the beginning of yourself.
You sure don't think about that at the time.
No. So tell me
No.
about that transition, I guess, from the ending of that for you to the new beginning of
The
Ed.
transition.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, really, it was. I had a very high-paying profession at the time. I was a senior consultant for Fortune 500 companies and global companies in the United States, Canada, and Europe. I had spent over 20 years consulting with, senior level management in these companies like the Boeing Corporation, Wells Fargo, pharmaceutical companies in Europe, and financial companies throughout North America, and functioning at a very high, if you want to call it type A personality, of which I am not, but I learned to perform at that level. I learned through my dysfunction, I learned to be able to do anything. If it meant convincing people I was something that made me feel good and that impressed them. So I ended up getting into this career, and I burned out after about 20 years. And I just began to slowly, it was interesting. I was very good at what I did, and just I began to just lose my ability to think, just focus. And the clients were beginning to complain about me. And I've never had a client complain about me. So they would call my boss and say, what's up with this guy? Because if at this level of consulting and business, if you're not, you got to be totally on your A game. And if you're not, they'll pick you off like a heartbeat, is how I put it. You can't fake your way at that level. You've got to really know what you're doing. And I just they began to complain to that because I was just seemed to be lost in what I was doing. And my boss at the time, this is around 2015, was asking me, are you all right? I have ADHD, and I've had it for many years, and I've been on Adderall as a medication for that. And I understand, I was very aware of my ADHD, and my boss knew that as well. He asked me, are you taking your meds? And he wasn't joking with me, right? He was like very concerned. Are you all right? And I said, yeah. I said, I don't know what's, I said, I think I need a break. I don't know if it's a midlife crisis, or if I'm burned out, or if I'm, what it is. And my aggression began to get worse and worse. And one of the things I will never forget that happened was, this was in 2015, or no, it wasn't. This was in 2012. I was diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and that comes from multiple what do you want to call it? Like if you're a service member and you go to serve, if you're in the Navy or the Air Force or something like that, if you see someone killed, it's from multiple traumas. That's what it is. See,
Yes.
That's ADHD right in front of you there. It just happened. My focusing ability, right? But complex post-traumatic stress disorder comes from multiple traumatic issues over time. And so those have been building up in my life for years. And there's an aggression and an anger that was in me. And I used to always wonder, why am I so angry? And I used to threaten people and want to hurt people.
Suits me.
And when I just slowly realized all this was affecting my job, my doctor said, you need to take a break. Because I was having panic attacks. I've never had these things happen before. I've always had it together. I've always held it together, And then I just slowly did not have it together anymore.
So
And
it's interesting that you say that, Ed, because in a way, how I see it is you were being shoulder tapped. First of all, your performance was not what it had been, which signaled you to something's not right. I can't think the same. I'm not really a type A, but I'm having to function. So there's a disconnect right there. But you start being shoulder tapped by not being able to think. You then ignore it, which we do, because we think, no, I'll overcome this. That's nothing compared to what I've overcome in my life. Blah, blah. There's our self-talk. Second shoulder tap, you notice your aggression picking up, kicking up, escalating, feelings of absolute anger, which we all know is a cover for sadness. And then the third thing that happens is these panic attacks. Finally, there's a realization that I need to stop. So
yeah.
I guess it's interesting how there's a progression, isn't there, in terms of...
Yeah, I think there's a cycle of awareness that happens to us when we begin to not have the ability to hold it together anymore. And when I say hold it together, it's, you're trying not to let the world see who you really are. When you don't know who you are, but the person who you think you are is a horrible person. But people don't see you in that way. And the aggression that I had, I wouldn't say it was from sadness. It was just, I was so angry all my life that I was sexually abused for so many years, and it destroyed my life. And so just so angry that my life had been so affected, and I knew it. And I used to think all the time, what would I be like? What kind of a man would I be if these things never happened? Like, I don't even know.
Yes.
It's like I missed out on who I was supposed to be.
Yes.
We all have bad things happen and whatnot, but this is really serious. I had friends commit suicide from being abused by one of the same men that abused me. This is just, it rips the soul out of your heart, is what it does. And that's where my aggression came from. I wasn't, yes, I guess you'd call it sad, but I was flat out angry that this had happened.
And you talk about that. I guess what we understand about trauma and the root of anger is it always tends to cover deep sadness. And I guess when you think about what you'd gone through all those years and had your childhood taken away, because you can't stay a child with years of the history of sexual abuse that you had to endure.
Yeah.
Ed, of course, it's going to come out in some way or other. I guess we just understand a bit more about anger. Actually, it can be unresolved sadness or So interesting. If you're comfortable, it would be really helpful for our men out there to potentially hear about what happened to you and where you've been able to move this now, if you're comfortable.
No, I'd be happy to. I'm always, whenever I get the opportunity to do that, I look forward to it, because I know that all of us have a story in our lives, whether you're sexually abused or not, and our stories make a difference in ourselves and make a difference in other people's lives. And so, being a videographer and filmmaker and podcaster, I love stories. And when it comes to sexual abuse and that kind of trauma, your story evolves over time. The more healing that you get. And so every time I tell it, every single time, even though it's been, it was 2012 that I hit the bottom, and it was 2015. It was like 2012 is like I hit rock bottom, and I knew that it was going to go really rough yet. I knew that it was great to have an awareness, but I knew that if I want to deal with this, it is not going to be all of a sudden, a good thing. It was going to get worse. And so, when we begin to tell our stories, and I'm a huge proponent of telling our stories, You don't need to start a podcast and a YouTube channel and tell the world like I did. But there are reasons why I did it that way. But I encourage everybody, and I always love speaking to men, that you need to talk to someone that you trust. And it can be someone that you know, or someone that you don't know that well, or it can even be a stranger that for some reason you've developed a good rapport with them. You have a sense of trust. And you don't always, rarely do you ever tell your whole story at one time, but as soon as you begin to tell someone and get it off your shoulder, I believe that's how healing really begins. It really begins.
Yes.
How can you hold it in and expect to get healed? And so what happened was, I have a step grandfather. He passed away many years ago, but he sexually abused my father and his brothers, and I believe also my dad's sister.
Okay.
And so my dad lived with that all his life. And back then they didn't have podcasts and shows like this. And, things were taboo and there's no way of dealing with them. So what ended up happening was, from age 4 until 7, my parents, when they were working, my sister, my only sibling, who's a year and a half older than me, used to get babysat by my grandmother, which is on my dad's side, his mother, and this my step grandfather. And when I would go to have my afternoon naps, he would come into my room, and it was a slow grooming process, and it eventually got down to, flat out molestation. And all of those experiences, when things like the trauma began, and I learned how to dissociate from myself. I learned how to not be in my body and kind of be somewhere else, flying around the room while this was happening. And it was just a weird experience, and then my parents would come home and I knew these things were happening, but, he did what most caregivers do. They say it's just a secret between you and me,
Yes.
and so you're so young and you trust, and you don't understand sex, and then you actually like it because you don't know any better. It happened for so long, over so many years, that I looked forward to it. And you hear the boys from the Michael Jackson case, they say the same thing, and it's not an uncommon thing. So that was a huge piece of shame to come over as well. It's not my fault.
No.
Sex is a great thing.
Yeah.
And so you don't know morality. It's not developed in you yet.
No.
Right and wrong is not there. You don't have a moral compass. And I didn't feel like I was being molested. It's just things were weird, right? Things were off. And then what was really tragic that happened was, the last time he abused me, he got caught in the act by my grandmother. So she came downstairs and caught him flat out in the act. And so I was 7 years old at the time. And of course, I'll never forget it. And I ended up running. We were in the basement. I ran up the stairs past my grandmother, out the back door and into the woods. And I hid there until my parents came home from work. And I listened to them yell and scream and argue in the house. And it was just, I remember just feeling it was, I couldn't use the word traumatized back then because I didn't know what it was, but there's just this horrible horror show experience that I'm going through. And there I was sitting out alone in the bushes. And then when my parents came home, I came out from the bushes and I walked into the back of the house. And I don't know what I was thinking, but I felt safe because they were home.
Yeah.
But I was hoping, I think I was hoping without cognitively thinking I was hoping, but I wanted someone to say, "Oh, here you are. Are you okay?
Yes.
Where have you been?"
Yeah.
Nobody said anything. My grandmother didn't say anything, and my grandfather. It was just this weird thing, like it never happened. So I come out of the bushes. I'm in the house, and then it's like it never happened.
Wow.
And so that was the last time that happened. And then within less than a year, our next door neighbor, who was about twice my age, so he was around 16 years old, he began molesting me. And it was just like, when you're young, not in your, when you're 16. I remember when I was really, really young. Kids do this. They play doctor,
Yes.
little girls, little boys, they do this. And it's perfectly natural, right? Like, I'll show you, you show me yours and I'll show you mine. It's just, it's a curiosity thing that's very
Of course it
normal and
is.
natural.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and it's healthy, right? And
Yeah.
if it's not influenced by, if it wasn't influenced by what happened to me with my grandfather, I don't know if it happened before or after, but it was a general sense of healthy curiosity,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And but when this is happening and the guy is 16 years old, it was kind of the same thing. He was like, you show me yours and I'll show you mine, sort of thing. And we had this weird relationship going on, and he would come over and he would, because he was the neighbor, and our neighbors were his father was in my parents' wedding party when they got married. So they were good friends. Again, close
Yes.
people. And,
Wow.
he would stay overnight and in my room, and all these things would happen. And then
Yes.
I'm used to it because I've been going through this with my grandfather. So it was like, it was always weird. I'm at the age 7, 8 years old now. I know that this is not good, but it's just so, I've never used the word weird so much when I've done an interview, but it was weird.
There's nothing weird about being weird or feeling weird.
But it's really is a good description of what it was. It's hard to explain these emotions that you have, that you just don't seem to have control over. Like, why would you allow someone to do something that is wrong? Well, it happens at such a young age, you just don't have control. You know this, Gloria. You understand this story.
Absolutely. And I guess one thing I would say to you is this. It's quite simple. There was a key moment there when you came back and out of the woods at 7 years old, and your parents and grandparents had the opportunity right then and there to say, what happened to you was so wrong. It was never your fault. This is not normal behavior. It's actually criminal behavior. Are you okay? What can we do? Tell us how you feel. Now, at that moment, Ed, in my humble opinion, there was an amazing opportunity for you to release how you were feeling, the confusion as a child that you would have felt, the love you felt for your step-grandfather, coupled with knowing it on some level it was really wrong because it wasn't in the public arena. All of those opportunities were missed. So I'm going to hesitate and make a leap here. My hypothesis, don't put money on it, is actually because of that, the path was paved with this is normalized behavior, but we just keep it a bit quiet. So no wonder your mind as a young child, 8 years old at this point, thought, oh, well, this is actually okay because nothing really happened about, what happened the last time someone did this to me. So I guess I'm just saying to you, not that you're perhaps a little, putting anything on yourself about this. You were younger, definitely had no power over any of it. But sometimes as small children or as children who are continuously abused sexually for years and years, as you and I both were, what happens is in our minds, to make it right, we make ourselves wrong. Yeah. So as small children, there must be something about me that's causing this. So I'm never going to speak. Coupled with the grooming that went on, they did it very well, don't they? They're very clever.
Oh, yes, it is amazing. Yes.
And the dissociation you would have felt. All those are quite a combination, actually, rendered at keeping you very, very quiet and very, very complicit, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, because I had, my mom and dad were good.
Yeah.
Like I had a really great upbringing. I was born and raised. We had a place in town, and I'm from British Columbia, Canada, and
Yeah.
we had a place at the lake. And as a family, we cleared the property, built the house, worked hard, play hard, snowmobiles, water skiing, recreation. We did all these as a family, right? And so I had, I'm so grateful that I had that. So I wasn't subject to like trauma in my family life,
No.
right? There was this
Yeah.
hidden thing. There's this hidden thing that my parents knew. And I'll get to that in a second. Like, why would they let this guy babysit me, which I'll get to in a second. But, as I got older and as I, went through my own recovery and I began to understand more of the history that the adults were living and dealing with, there's no excuses here, but it adds to the story and helps to understand why things are the way they are. Now, my grandfather was, he used to beat my grandmother and put her in the hospital. And he used to threaten to blow her head off with a gun. And he's a World War I and World War II vet. And so he, my parents and my grandmother were under this oppression that he had in the family, and they were afraid that he would kill my dad's mother, and that makes sense for the level of arguing that I heard in the house that day. It was elevated beyond the level of even her catching him in this act, right? It was so outrageous. I had never heard my grandparents argue ever, let alone at this level. And I was so confused as to why. I just saw these personalities in them that I'd never seen before. Now I understand. And this is so let me continue into the next part of the story. So then the next door neighbor thing stopped when I started going to elementary school. And that's when the next phase of this situation in my life began. My grade 4 and 5 elementary school teacher was a pedophile, and he molested 80% of the boys in my grade 4 class. Wow. And then in our grade 5 class. And, long story short, he ended up going to prison for his abuses to me, and he got charged with myself and 5 other boys, even though there was like somewhere between 80 and 100 that he had abused. And one of my friends, one of the childhood friends that I grew up with, he committed suicide because of this. And then when that was over, and then I went to high school, now I'm in puberty, and now my life is just, decade after decade after decade. It's like, I'm just trying to figure out who the hell I am. Right. And just all I do is I just try to pretend to be something that I should be at this age. And shouldn't you have a job, or shouldn't you go to college, or shouldn't you be like this, and shouldn't you be like that? And I'm just trying to be like you're supposed to be without actually being myself.
Yeah.
And everything I did was for attention. All my life was driven by wanting to get attention. My life was driven by performance orientation, meaning the reason I had this incredible career, it wasn't even because I had the education. I didn't, or the certification. I've learned very quickly how to adapt and overcome. And even when it comes to learning a skill set, I can do it. But you burn out after so long. And this is what happens with so many survivors of childhood sexual abuse, is that you hold it in for so long, and then you just burn out. And that's where the healing begins. And man, it's harder. I'm gonna tell you, it's harder coming to terms with it and overcoming it than it was living through it. I look at the 4 and some odd decades of this horrible life that I lived. That was easier than overcoming it.
Not in my case, but yes.
it's yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah, but that's a good point, because it's
Yeah,
all
we're
of our journeys are
different.
different, right?
Yes,
All of our
yes.
journeys are different, and there's no. That's why you can't compare yourself to somebody. That's why you've probably had this happen so many times. Well, actually, I know you probably have not had this happen, but I've had
Have a
people say to
go.
me, I think I'm right on this one. I'll bet on it. But I've had so many people say to me, they're just like, "Oh, you have such a horrible story, such a intense story," and I'm like, my story is nothing compared to many people that have told me their stories.
Yeah.
Mine is is nothing. But the reality is, there is no comparing of your story. And one survivor said to me sometimes, he goes, "Well, it only happened to me once." I'm like, "What? Time out. It only happened to you once. Once is all it takes to suck your soul out of your life.
Yeah.
Once is all it takes to completely destroy the trajectory of your future."
Yes.
So don't minimize your story
Yes.
by comparing to mine, by saying this, and then thinking that, well, then you got to pull up yourself by the bootstraps, because this only happened. This wasn't a big deal compared to what happened to Ed or what happened to Gloria. Surely I should be able to get my act together. No, it's not like that. It's not the number of times that it happened. And it's not the grade of depravity of grossness that you suffered. It's you as an individual. How did it impact your soul? And it impacts everybody differently.
Yeah, I think you're
How
right.
you got here, how you are alive and here, Gloria, I don't know. And same with me. It's like, I don't even understand.
One day you'll finish the book and we'll have another chat.
Yeah. Yeah, I will. Yes, I will do that.
But look, my point to you is this, my friend, and I see it very clearly. Brene Brown writes a lot about this comparative suffering.
Yes.
And I totally agree with everything you said, 100%. The one time, the only time, the range to which it occurred, it doesn't matter. The point is the impact still robbed you and still had impact and still changed everything that was then going to happen in your life. So I think honor yourself, audience out there. Whatever you went through, we support you, and we don't feel that we are any more impacted than you are, and that your story is any less needing to be heard. In fact, I know Ed supports this as well. We would be so honored if you would just share even with one person.
Yes.
Because actually we're handing the shame back every time we speak the words. Every time this lessens for us, the shame, the guilt, and everything. So you're not alone. You never have been. In New Zealand, the police tell me it's up to 1 in 3 survivors, both male and female. So Ed, for us, that's over 1 million people, and it's the silent endemic is what I call it, which is why I'm really trying to get people like you on the show to share, so that we can all learn and recover.
I like what you said. It is so easy to dismiss some of the words that we use, and when you're not alone. You hear that, it's easy for us to say it, because we use it ever since we started our recovery. We found out, we're not alone, and then we use that term and that phrase. But it's I just want to hammer that home a little bit for everybody that's listening, is that we don't say that lightly. Right? When I started attending a men's recovery group, which I'm like probably the typical man. I don't need that. I started therapy. I started dealing with my past. For me, I had sexual addiction was a big deal. I was addicted to porn and all this stuff. And I was hiring escorts and doing all these crazy things. And then I thought, it's all out in the open. I'm talking about my therapist, everything. I don't need men's therapy. And then my therapist said, you know what, just try it once. Just try it once. And I don't know why I agreed with her, because I felt I don't need this. I mean, I really felt that I didn't need this. And I went once. I went once, and I that's when I really, really got impacted by that phrase, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
I got there, and when you're new to the group, there was only about maximum 10 of us, so it averaged about 5 to maybe 7 people that showed up every time, small group. And when you're new, you get to tell your story. Now, when you tell your story at that stage of your recovery, it's all about you. I mean, it's very emotional, right? You want people to just feel all this trauma. It's coming out, and you're like, this happened and that happened, this and that, and all this intensity is in the room, which I didn't realize I was elevating this intense emotion in the room. I got finished telling everything, and I was like, almost like out of breath. And the facilitator, he was so good, and the men were so good. No one reacted to anything that I was saying. And we want a reaction when we tell our story. We want people to react, but it's good when you're with a healthy group of men or women that you don't get a reaction.
Yeah.
The reaction that they gave me, actually, they did give me a reaction. The reaction was they just listened intently. They just listened until I was done. And then when I was done, the facilitator is such a wise guy. He goes, you know what? He says, why don't we just take a minute and just, let's just have one minute of silent meditation. Let's just do that. And I was like, okay.
Ed, meditate.
And so we did this. He used this app on his phone, literally, and put on 1 minute timer, just dead silence. And all that energy just left the room, And when it was over, he looked at me and goes, so how you feel? I said, okay. He says, do you feel your feet on the ground? I didn't understand these things at the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I feel my feet on the ground. I didn't understand what he was doing. And what he was doing was teaching me and leading the other men on how to be in the moment. Yeah. Connect with yourself and the people that you're around you, like I am right now with you on this show. I'm not thinking about what I have to do later on this afternoon or the things I did this morning, what I got to do. I'm totally in this moment here right now, because I may not have a moment. I could, who knows, maybe I'll pass out and die on your show. I don't know. I'm not joking though. You don't have a guarantee on the next moment in your life. No. So I've learned to live in the moment and appreciate time and appreciate relationships and sounds and smells and things that have a feel to them. Because as survivors, we tend to disassociate from our surroundings because we're always in a reactive, protective mode, and we don't get to relax.
I like what you're saying with that. I think it's a really useful for our audience, actually, Ed. We're always in reactive, we're always on high alert. I know for myself, hypervigilance was my best friend.
Yes. You have better words than I do.
Well, only because I studied psychology for a few years. But
I'm glad you did.
Yeah, but look, I needed, what do they say? Healer, heal thyself. And that's why a lot of us are drawn to these healing professions, actually. Yeah. But the point is, I don't want to take it away from what you're saying, because I think there's real gold here. When we look at what we have to do to survive and be, our dissociation served us. Yes. Triggering serves us, believe it or not, because I believe it actually helps us. It helps vindicate and validate that what we went through was real. I think having the alertness or the hypervigilance serves us because it reminds us, gosh, as a child, I was always in that state. And how exhausting is that? Your central nervous system just spirals. And I think trust is a big one, Ed.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that for you, as you went through your childhood years? That teacher thankfully was convicted of what he did. Unfortunately, you've lost a friend to suicide, which is just appalling. Apparently 1 in 5 men who commit suicide, we believe, in Australasia, have this as a background. Child sexual abuse has been in their lives. So it's huge. So trust, when you think about the word trust in all of this, what comes to mind? What's your view?
I think that's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. The first thing that comes to my mind is trusting myself. Because, I've learned what integrity and character are. And the way I describe it is, I just want to be the same person when I'm inside where I live as I am when I walk out the door. We all wear different hats and we put on different personas depending. We have our, it's just human nature. But it just, at the end of the day, no matter who you are, where I met you, if we all got together in one room, you would all know me as the same person.
Yes.
Right. And in different ways. But back then, I was so many different people. Some people knew me as a upstanding Christian youth leader. Some people saw me as a successful business person. Some people saw me as, hey, I'm one of the guys you like to hang out and go to the strip clubs with, and all these different, split personalities, if you want to call them that. And I was very careful to not have all these people in the same room. Like if you look at my Facebook post anywhere beyond 2012, everything was very general, very, very general. And now you can see the progression of my life. I post who I am in that moment, and my growth and my healing is just you can see it coming out. So now that I trust myself, and I'm not perfect. I still deal with addictions, and I still deal with depression. I'm actually, I don't know if you knew this, but I'm writing a chapter in Stefan's book about depression.
Yes.
Yeah, so I thought it was just for boys. What?
He's got, Stefan. He's taken a leaf out of your book, I think, Ed. You've been a terrible influence.
That's funny.
For our audience out there, Stefan does a lot in this mental health space as well. So he's running 2 specific groups and writing books on depression. And one group Ed is in, so he'll be writing a chapter, and one group I'm in, and it's for the women's book on depression.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
That's so great.
Yeah.
So, I still deal with challenges in life, and life isn't perfect. And I've learned I've learned what humanity is, and, common experiences that we all experience. And so now I've learned to trust other people as well, trust myself, and trust life. Right? Trust that whether you believe in God, you don't believe in God, or whatever you believe in, just to trust that you're going to be okay, that life is not against you. It's life is for everyone in the same way, but we don't get a chance to choose where we're born and where we like you think about what's happening in the Ukraine right now. This life happens. There's a good, bad, there's evil, there's love, there's kindness, there's hatred. This is all part of the human experience. And when we learn to love and trust ourselves, then we are able to love and trust what happens in life. Yeah. And I got to tell you, if I had not gone through this stuff and went through the pandemic, I would have been like out of my mind, like a lot of people that I know, where they're so that just, if you don't feel like you have control in your life, it's life is hard, and now, you know, I think this is one of the benefits, which may sound strange, of being a survivor. There's a couple of benefits I am so grateful for. One is you get to have a completely clean slate and start your life over again. When you finally realize that you don't know who the hell you are, who the hell am I, which is a very, very disconcerting place to be.
Yeah.
And where a lot of pain and frustration happened for me, like, who the hell am I? When I finally realized, you know what, I can be whoever I want. So who is that? And that's what the tagline for my nonprofit is. It's find yourself, live yourself, give yourself. And finding yourself happens in your trauma. It's when you are in darkness in your life and you just don't know who you are. And you have to go through a process of learning to identify, well, who am I? Who am I in all of this? And then you literally have to learn to start practicing that. You know, I remember going through this, you know, because I ended up losing my job and my career.
Yes.
I ended up going on disability for mental health, for depression and all these things. And it was so embarrassing and shameful, but I couldn't handle living. I couldn't handle working. I was suicidal.
No. Yeah.
This isn't that long ago, right? This is 2015, 16, and 17. This is 2022. I mean, I'm just coming out of all this stuff. And I remember going to a coffee shop one morning, because all I ever did in one phase of my recovery is I just didn't like being around people. I was just so intensely just uncomfortable. I just wanted to be alone all the time, everywhere. And so I would get up early and I'd find coffee shops that opened up really early, and I'd go there for a few hours. And then when the morning coffee people come in to get their coffee on the way to work is when I would leave. And this one place I went to get coffee, and the barista says to me, he says, "Oh, good morning." He says, so what do you do? And this was just at the point when I was on disability long enough that I lost my job. There's no going back. Like if you're on disability longer than 6 months, you're automatically terminated. You're done, right? So I'd been on disability for 6 months and I knew I'd lost my job. Up until then, when you asked me what I do, I loved it. When people asked me what I do, I tell them I'm a consultant for Fortune 500 companies. I travel the world. I work with CIOs at PepsiCo and Wells Fargo, and I'm this amazing, sexy consulting, and it's incredible the lifestyle that I have. I used to have my identity in that. You follow?
Yeah.
Right? My identity was in telling people, here's who I am and what I do. And then I wasn't ready when he said, "What do you do?" I realized suddenly I couldn't say that anymore. I did for 6 months, even though I wasn't doing it and I was on disability. I wasn't going to tell anybody I was on disability. I still used this wonderful fantasy story of my career because I planned on going back. But my mental health care and my medical doctors would not release me to go back to work after 6 months. They were like, you're not ready to go back, right? And I lost that. And when he said, "What do you do?" I was just suddenly, I thought, well, what do I say? And so I looked at him because I'm just so used to being, remember, this is in the phase of my recovery where I'm living myself, right? I'm finding myself and living myself. So who am I without this sexy career and all the money that I make? Who am I? I didn't know at the time. So I was as honest as I could possibly be. And this is the wonderful thing about being yourself. And you change and you grow as life goes on. I looked at him and I said, I don't do anything. I was just thinking, what do I do? I do nothing.
Yeah.
I do nothing. I try to get through the day doing nothing. And then I do that again tomorrow. Right. So I wish it was on camera. He looked at me and he was like, what do you say to someone when they say that? Right. So he looks at me and he goes, "Well, are you retired?" And
then you got offended.
No, well, I wasn't offended. I was confused, right? I was confused because I'm trying to figure out, what do I do, right? Like, what can I tell this guy that I do? Because I really am doing nothing right now. And I had this look of confusion on my face. He goes, "Are you retired?" And I was like, "No." So what? I didn't say no, right? I just was like, "No." And then he says, "Well, are you like, are you in the service? Are you are you a veteran? And I said, no. He looks at me and he just goes like, what else do you say? He goes, well, that must be really nice.
Oh,
And it was a real turning point for me.
yeah.
And I stood back and I said, you know, it really is nice.
Yeah.
I don't have to do anything right now. Like, I'm able to get off this effing treadmill in life
Yeah.
of performing and being and doing and pretending. And right now I get the chance on disability to just really do nothing and catch my breath for the first time in my life. Even though I'm having a weird, awkward conversation with somebody, I'm completely in the moment. I've never been in the moment before. It's always like, oh, let me tell you what I do. And I'm not even thinking in the moment. I'm like, what I'm thinking is, how can I impress you with something? And now I don't. I'm like, I love it when people ask me what I do, because sometimes I still don't know what I'm doing. And I just love just the freedom to be myself. And it's taken so much hard work to get here, you know, where you just love yourself. And that's what my podcast is about. It's the tagline is the kindness you give to others is a reflection of the compassion you give yourself. So I was kind to people if it benefited me, or I was kind to people if I thought they thought I was a nice guy, or I was kind to people if I was never just generally kind to people, because I hated myself. And when I finally learned to love myself, you know, it's like my days, I just recognized everybody around me all the time. So now I'm like, hey, how are you? Hi, thank you. Hey, have a nice day. How am I? I'm fine. How are you? I was never like that before. Have love and joy and compassion in my life for myself and those around me. And that's where the podcast came out. What a way to live. Has nothing to do with money or position or influence or anything. Just had everything to do with I'm loving myself. I'm loving every breath I'm taking, and I'm loving the people around me. I can't think of anything else in life that I'd rather do or know well how to do.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And look, it's so powerful, and I'm really humbled by your sharing. And I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people listening to this. So, Ed, I just want to give you something you may not have realized about yourself. Although you suffered what you did for many, many years, and you hit the dark night of the soul, and your doing nothing was actually you in recovery from the
I was
trauma.
doing something. I was
You were in
learning,
recovery.
finding myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But guess what? That still didn't stop you. You then turned around and created MeTooWhatNow. You know, that fantastic, beautiful place for adult survivors and mainly men, actually, to be able to share
Yes.
their stories and come to you for help. You did
Yes.
that. You know,
Yes.
wow, what a gift. You then went on and did the visible kindness with that tagline. I mean, wow, thank you, actually. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank
That's
you.
really powerful. I think sometimes you say, well, you know, who was I? And I was just different things to different people. I think sometimes what we don't always do enough of is give ourselves credit
Yes.
for adapting by doing whatever it takes. And if that means you're people pleasing, if that means you're different to that person, if that means
Yes.
you're
Yes.
drinking too much or smoking too much or
Yes.
lying your head off,
Yep.
applaud yourself
Yes. It's
because
okay.
it helped you get through.
It's okay. That is so powerful. And even, I'm not a therapist and I can't give any recommendations or whatever, but I'll never forget one time what my therapist said to me. It was along those terms, She said, Ed, don't be so hard on yourself for trying to get out of porn, or to stop drinking, or to stop lying, or to stop,
Yeah.
just, these have served you and kept you from literally
Yes.
killing yourself or other
Yes.
people.
Yeah.
So just be aware that, hey, these are things you don't want to do because they don't serve you now, and give
No.
yourself time,
Yeah.
because these are not easy things to change in your life. They're deeply psychologically set into who we are.
Yes.
They have
Yes.
really, really, like, mentally and neurologically, are deeply embedded into our psyche, and it takes time. So it's okay. And as it actually still serves you well along your journey.
Oh,
The day will come when it's going to
it
be
may
just
not.
something,
Yeah.
or it may not, or it may not. That is so good. But it's, yeah, it's that's so good.
I think, and I love what you've said.
Yeah.
When I asked about trust, thank you, because trusting yourself, that's a really big deal for survivors. We were conditioned from the time we were abused, actually, to not trust ourselves, because potentially no one wanted to either believe it or B, act on it.
Or
And
we're too
so,
scared to let anybody know it.
because we're told they'll either kind of kill us or our siblings or our mother or whatever it happens to be. I'm not saying that's true in every case, but the point is, because of our conditioning, although instinctively every part of us is screaming, something's weird here. I'm using
Yeah.
Ed's phrase now, everyone.
Yeah.
Something's weird here.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
feel right. And then to have that confirmed by parents who never spoke at that pivotal moment creates that feeling of, well, how can I actually trust that this is not right? I don't feel good about it, but we carry on as if. See where the trust can then dissipate. Whereas you've taken years, and for some of us as well, we've taken years and years to rebuild who we actually are, not
Yeah.
a version of ourselves we put out there.
Yeah. Yes.
So,
And it's I used to be frustrated with seeing people who had, like yourself, like, how did you get to where you are? And like, you seem to have done it faster than me. Shouldn't you take longer than me because your trauma was worse than mine? And how come some people get over it quicker than other people? So I would just have it like, am I hanging on to it? Like, what's my problem? And the reality is the length of time for your recovery. First of all, I don't think we ever totally recover. Just like you'd never totally, if you'd never have trauma, you never completely figure out who you are either. Right. But, it's just, it's the sooner we settle into accepting ourselves, and we're not in a race.
yeah.
And I like to see improvement. I don't want to go, because I don't think we stay neutral. I think either we're improving in life or we're going down. But I think it's just it's like I think my journey looks like this, like up and then down, and then up, down, up, down, down, up, down.
Absolutely.
But if you draw a line through it, it looks like this.
Yeah.
It's on an upward trajectory, but it's got this, it's like the stock market.
Yeah.
It crashes, but it's forever continuously going up. And as long as you can see that,
And
then
look,
you can.
I think, yeah. So there's a couple of things I just want to point out to you. One is this: your kind of decision to start the recovery process and the healing for you began, 4 or 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
I began mine 30 years ago, 3 decades ago. Spot the difference? So my point is this: you're absolutely right. It's not comparative, but the point is, Ed, when the time is right, the teacher appears.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And so,
and if you want it, it will somehow. That's why I'm such a big proponent of telling your story to somebody, because somehow it magically opens up the door in life. I can't figure these things out. You're better at it, these things, than I am. But
thank you. But who knows?
when I began to tell and share, just, just life began to change, and that's the wonderful thing about it is that you realize that life really is in your favor. It's not against you. When
Look,
you learn, I call it,
life is always working for us, not against us. We're actually here to experience joy, believe it or not. And it's just how we get to that place. If we don't suffer, we don't grow. So there's another one that you've alluded to earlier.
Yes.
But Ed, I just have to come back to this because I'm gobsmacked with absolute, wow, you blow me away. It came to you, 4 years ago, 2017, 5 years ago nearly, that something needed to change. So what does Ed do? He does nothing in his words, but it's his recovery time. But then what does he do, audience? Oh, he starts creating some wonderful charities for people who have also suffered to get some help from.
Can I share why I did that?
But that's powerful stuff.
There's a big reason why I did that, though. It wasn't like a big part of my story that we never talked about was I ended up suing the provincial government in British Columbia, Canada, and I also sued the teacher as well, criminally, not civilly. And when I did that, I decided that because I had so many friends that had been abused by this guy, I thought, this is before the nonprofit started, I thought, I'm going to, because you when you file a lawsuit, you choose whether you want to be public with it or not. Right. And your attorney will honor what you want to do.
Yeah.
And I chose not to do it privately. I chose to do it publicly because I just knew that any boys that I went to school with at that time, they would remember my name like I remember theirs.
Yes.
And if anything I did through this lawsuit caused them to help deal with whatever they were suffering from, great. And then in that process, that's when I decided, well, why not? Like I was so used to functioning at a high level in my career. I've been on disability for a couple of years, and I thought I don't want to lose that edge. I don't want to lose my cognitive abilities and my thinking abilities and my business skills. I don't want to just lose that. But I couldn't go back to work, and so I just started this nonprofit, just like teeny tiny small. It wasn't a big deal, and I did it under the guidance of my therapist. And if it was too much, then I could just quit it. No big deal. And I didn't do a lot of huge fundraising events or whatever, but what I used it for was just a platform to tell my story. Because a friend of mine said to me, Ed, you should start a YouTube channel and tell your story. And I'm like, what? Why would I want to do that? Right? I mean, why would I want to do that?
Well, now you can see why.
And
Look
so I did,
yes.
And it was an interesting progression how it all happened. It wasn't like I just suddenly became saintly and decided, I'm going to do something good for the good of everyone. It was like this lawsuit really, if you watch the early clips on my YouTube channel for MeTooWhatNow, I'm going through the lawsuit, and that's why I did it. And then it became, this is the thing, right? Life is a journey. It'll present itself and it'll unfold itself before you. So I really appreciate the kind words, but I didn't try to make a difference and do something powerful. It was for my own recovery and for any of the boys that I went to school with at the time. And it just turned into being something really cool. I mean, the name MeTooWhatNow is such a brandable name. It's a great SEO on the internet. And, I'm so thankful for the people that I've met and the interviews I've had. And it's been just really an amazing ride. It's been so much fun. I do mean that. It really has been fun and hard and tragic, but it's been so fulfilling and enriching for myself and others. And just like being on your show this is amazing. It really is.
It's really powerful for me. We need to head towards an ending. And I guess I just wondered what advice or tips would you potentially offer other men out there who are listening to this and perhaps struggling to come to terms with what's happened to them?
Sure. I love that question because I've been asked it a lot, and it's kind of the same, but I think it's really something that can be helpful. First of all, I always tell men and women or any survivor, reach out if you want to. If you don't have anyone to talk to, you want to talk to me, reach out. You can go to my website and send me an email, or there's different ways you can contact me. Reach out. I have people calling me all the time. We either talk on the phone, we do a Zoom, or we email or direct message. I don't care. Whatever you're comfortable with. If that suits you. I also recommend that, if you haven't been in therapy and gotten help professionally for this, it's a good thing to check out. The last thing I didn't say about the men's group, I after that one time I went, I ended up going for 2 years. I went for 2 solid years until they disbanded that particular group. It was the best thing I could have ever done.
Yeah.
It was the best thing. So don't, it's easy to say, don't be ashamed. It's easy to say, and it's also easy to say, I'm okay. I'm not, I'm fine. But if you are not sure, and especially after listening to this kind of a show, that there's something not right in your life, by all means, reach out to me or Gloria, get some professional help. Or another thing too is this: you mentioned Brene Brown. Brene Brown is the first. I recommend do some Googling and do some searching. Go on YouTube, and I'm a male survivor of childhood sexual abuse. No one's going to know you did that, and just look for some information and find something that resonates with you that can help you. There's so much out there for resources now. Go to my YouTube channel, and you'll hear stories of survivors, and I've vlogged part of my life on there. Just find some way to connect, find some way to get to the point where you find that person where you begin to tell your story. Out of all those things, that's my biggest wish and prayer for men, is that they would get the courage to tell someone they trust what happened to them, even if it's just a little bit. You don't get to tell the whole thing, just a little bit, to get it off your heart, to get it off your shoulders, and just so you can breathe for the first time, maybe. That's what it felt like for me, just to get a breath of air that was real, and find out that I'm okay, I'm not alone, and you're really, you can get out of this thing. You can overcome it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really wise word. So audience, this is someone who's been through it. He's managed to emerge from it and survive. And the value in what you bring from your truth and your existence will help shine a light for many. So I thank you, Ed. And
I thank you, Gloria. You are so amazing. you are so amazing. Thank you. I appreciate it. But my goodness, you are an amazing woman.
Thank you. So could you stay on the line, please? And I'll just end with our callers, our viewers out there now. So look, thank you to everyone who has observed this show. I hope you found it as useful as I did, and the learning will never stop. And I think, as Ed said earlier, we will continue to experience the impact of this till the day we die. And it's how we work with that, I believe. Please feel free to subscribe and share this show. The more survivors that can be helped, the less shame there is out there. Remember, we're all about handing the shame back. It never belonged to us to start with. I also have a podcast called Handing the Shame Back. You can find that on Apple, Google Play, Spotify, Buzzsprout. Feel free to go and have a listen. I share uplifting blog content on there, as well as some of these survivor interviews. Finally, if you would like to be a guest on the show, please go to my website, gloriamasters.com, and fill out the online form. And yeah, have a good look around. So to all of you out there, thanks for being part of this today. We believe you. We stand beside you. Take care.